Hey everyone, in this video series I'm going to teach you everything there is to know about the Linux command line. So let's get started. The first thing we have to do is we got to bring up the terminal. To do that, just click this button over here, search for the terminal application, and that should open it up. And let me make this a little bigger for you guys. Alright, so the first Linux command that you need to know is pwd. And what this command does is it tells you where you are in the Linux directory structure. It's telling you where you're sitting in what specific folder and how to get to that folder. So if we read this, what this line is telling us is from root, and I'll explain what root is in a sec, we then go into the home folder, and then we go into a directory titled Sanjeev. And if you don't know what root is, the root folder is the highest you can go, right? There's nothing past the root folder. It's equivalent to like the C drive in Windows. You know, there's nothing past that. All other directories and folders and files will reside in root. And to help better explain the Linux directory structure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the file viewer, and hopefully that's going to allow us to visually see how everything is laid out. So let me go to the root folder. I'm just going to click on another location. So you can see here, my computer, this is the root. So this slash implies that this is the parent directory and we can't go any further than that. So let's go inside here. So here we're in the root directory. And if we look back at the original path, we're under the home directory under root and then my name. So if we go to home, let's find the home folder. And then we see my name. This is where we're physically located in the Linux directory structure. All right, so the next command I want to show you guys is the command to list all files in a specific directory. So how do we see these files from where we are? So we're in this folder, but we don't know what's in it. So to find out or to list all the files and all other folders within a directory, all you have to do is type in the command ls. That's it. And you can see here it's going to print out all the directories and all the folders that exist within the folder titled Sanjeev. And you can see here we've got desktop, downloads, music, and it's the same content that's listed over here. All right. So the next command I want to show you after ls is how do we change directories, right? How do we move to a different folder? Let's say as an example, how do we move into the downloads folder to see what's inside of it? To do that, there's a command called cd. You just type in cd and the name of the folder that you want to move into. So if we want to go into downloads, we just type in cd and then downloads. And remember, everything in Linux is case sensitive. So me typing in downloads is with a capital D is very different than me typing in cd downloads, because if I try to do cd downloads with a lowercase d, it's going to say there's no such directory, and that's because there is no actual directory with a lowercase d downloads. So we got to make sure that the case sensitivity matches what our actual folders are. So if we go cd downloads, then now once we're inside downloads, let's go ahead and list all the contents of this directory. If we do ls, nothing gets printed out, and that means that there's no actual files or folders within the downloads directory. And just to make sure, to verify that the command line's working and something odd isn't happening, let's see this visually in the file explorer. So if we go to downloads, you can see here folder is empty. All right, so let's go ahead and change directories to the root directory. So let's move to the root directory, and all we do is cd and then slash. So here we're now in the root directory, which means if we go back to here, we're right here now. And if we do an ls, we can see all the folders that exist within the root directory, and we can go ahead and just explore any of them. Feel free to try this out on your own. Just practice moving from directory to directory. You need to get really proficient at moving around the Linux file system if you want to become a Linux admin, or if you just want to be proficient at using the Linux command line. Now, whenever we run a command like cd, where we have to provide a directory that we want to move to, or if we're just running a command on a specific file, we ultimately have to provide Linux a path to that specific directory that we're trying to move into, or the specific path to reach the file that we're either trying to access or change. Now, in Linux, there's two different kinds of paths. There's relative, and then there's absolute. So I'm going to start off by explaining how absolute paths work. Now, let me run pwd just to make sure where we are in the Linux file system. So we're back at /home/Sanjeev. And within there, we've got these folders. Let's say we want to move into the downloads folder, right? We want to provide the full, we want to do this using an absolute path. With absolute paths, we have to provide the full path all the way from root. So if we look at the file explorer, let's go back to root. So we're in root. So basically that's the same thing as doing cd/, right? And we need to provide a path to get to the downloads directory that was within the folder titled Sanjeev. To do that, remember, we have to go inside home, and then we have to go inside Sanjeev. So in the file explorer, let's go ahead and do that. So we go into home. So we're in /, we go into home, and then we go into Sanjeev, and then we want to go into downloads. So to do that, using absolute path, we have to provide that full path that we just did. So it would be cd, right? Then with an absolute path, remember, you always start with root. You always start at the root, the top of the file system, and you provide the full path to the folder you're trying to change to. So we're trying to get to downloads. So remember, that's going to be in /home. Then within home, there's my name, and then we do downloads. And that takes us to the downloads directory. And if we do pwd, you can see here, it took us to /home/Sanjeev/downloads. And the great part about absolute file paths is no matter where you are in the Linux file system, if you provide an absolute path to a folder or a file, it will be able to reach that folder or file. So as an example, if I go to cd/, so we're in root, and let's just say I change to var. So now I'm in /var. If we look at the directory, it's /var, and if we look at it in the file explorer, we're in root, and then we move to var. So this is where we are. And if I provide the path to change directories to the downloads folder again, and I provide the full path, which is /home/Sanjeev/downloads, it's going to take me to the downloads folder, right? So that's how absolute paths works. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that made sense. Now I want to talk about relative paths. So relative paths can be a little bit trickier. We've already actually technically done an example of relative paths. If I go back to my home directory, which is /home Sanjeev, and then we print out the contents. So let's say we want to move into the downloads folder. We've already explained how to do that with the absolute path, which is just typing that full path in there. But we can also use a relative path. And it's called relative, I think it's called relative path because it's relative to where you are specifically in the Linux directory structure. So right now, we're in /home/Sanjeev. Since the downloads folder is already within this folder, we can just do cd downloads. We don't have to provide the full path because we're already at /home/Sanjeev. So all we have to do is just change directory to downloads, right? And now we're in the downloads directory. The problem with the relative path is that if I'm in a different folder, then the relative path to the downloads folder is not going to be the same. So let's change back to the /var directory. And I'm going to bring this up in the file explorer as well. So we go into var. So this is where we are. And if we try to do a relative path to downloads folder, and and we just do cd downloads, the command line is going to throw an error saying there's no such file or directory. And if you look at what's actually in /var, we can see that there's no folder called downloads. And that's because that folder exists in /home/Sanjeev. So we can't just do cd downloads, right? The relative path is the path relative to where you are. And where we are is in /var, and there's no actual downloads folder there. So that's why you have to be a little more careful when you use relative paths, because it matters where you are in the file system when you run that specific command. Now, technically, I could do, I haven't shown you this example yet on how to do this, but if you want to go up one folder in the command line, so we're in /var, and say we want to get to just root, you just do cd ... And that's going to take us from /var to /. And now we can see the contents of the root directory. So to always move up one directory, just do cd ... And if we go back into /var again, we can actually provide a relative path from /var to the downloads folder. And you may be wondering, well, how do we do that? There's no downloads folder within var. That's in /home/Sanjeev. We can do cd. Then relative to where we are, we have to think about how do we get to the downloads folder, right? The first thing we got to do is we've got to move up one directory up to the root folder. And how do we do that? I just showed you guys how to do that. We do ... So that's going to take us up one folder to the root folder. Then within the root folder, once we're in the root folder, we have to find the home directory, right? So we'll just click on that. So what we do is now we're at root. We go into the home directory. Then within the home directory, we click on Sanjeev. So we go to Sanjeev. And then within there, we then have the downloads folder. So then we can do /downloads. And now we've successfully changed to the downloads folder. And that was technically using a relative path instead of an absolute path. So remember, I just want to reiterate, an absolute path is the full path from root to the folder or file you're trying to access. The relative path is the path to a specific folder or file from wherever you are specifically currently residing in the Linux file system. So if I'm in a specific folder like /var/temp, how do I get step by step to the downloads folder? And whatever steps I take, that's going to be the relative path. So hopefully that made sense. I feel like I kind of confused myself when I was explaining that a bit, but once you practice this a few times, you'll find that it kind of becomes second nature. You don't really think about, oh, am I using a relative path or am I using an absolute path? You're just going to know whichever way makes sense for you at that given moment. That's what you're going to do. All right. So the next command I want to show you guys is how do we create a file, right? And Linux provides a simple command to just create an empty file. And that command is touch. You type in touch and then the name of the file that you want. And you can just call it, we'll just call this file 1. And once we do that, if we print out the contents of the downloads directory, you can see here we now have a file called file 1. And if we go into the downloads folder to visually see it, you can see we have a file. And if we try to open it up, it's just a blank text file with no info. So now we've learned how to create a file. I want to show you guys how to create a directory, a folder, right? So we're in the downloads folder, and I want to create a folder called recently downloaded, okay? The command to do that is mkdir. mkdir, and then the name of the folder that you want. So we're going to call this recently_downloaded. Once we do that, you can see immediately the folder gets created. And if we do an ls to print out the contents of the downloads folder, we now have the file that we created, as well as the recently downloaded directory that we created. Now, one thing I want to point out is both of these commands, we don't just have to create a file or a directory in the specific location we're at. So as an example, let's say we're in the downloads folder like we are right now. So we're in /home/sanjeev/downloads. But let's say we want to create a folder or file in the root directory. All right, what would you do if you wanted to do that? We could do a cd to root and then do touch file at root. Okay, so this threw an error, and that's because to actually write a file to the root directory, you need root privileges. I didn't want to explain that in this video, so for now, just take my word for it. If you ever want to do anything that requires root privilege, you just type in the word sudo before it, and then you run the command. All right, so, and it's going to always prompt you for the password, so just go ahead and put your password in. So I just created a file called file at root, and you can see here we created file at root. Now, let's say we didn't want to have to move or change directories all the way to the root directory just to create a file in it. Let's move back to my downloads directory again. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a file in the root directory, but we're not going to change to that directory first. And we can do that by providing the exact path for the file. So as an example, we're going to do touch, and then we're going to provide the full path to the file. So what's the full path to the root directory? It's just a slash, right? So we just do slash, and then we'll say another underscore file. So we're now creating a file in the root directory, even though we're in the downloads folder at the moment. This should create a file in the root directory without forcing us to move to the root directory first. And remember, since we're changing the root directory, we have to put in the word sudo beforehand. Once again, don't worry too much about that. If that doesn't make sense, I'm going to make a separate video explaining that. Sudo. So now we created a file in the root directory called another file while still being in the downloads directory. So if we change to the root directory just to verify that we successfully did that, you can see here we have another file, right? So basically, I just wanted to show you that, with most of these commands, right, if you want to create a file or a directory, you can provide a path to anywhere in the file system to create that file without you having to move there. So from root, I could technically create a file in the downloads directory, and I could just do, or let's say we want to make another folder, right? Let's just do mkdir, and we'll call this, my folder, but we want this to be under the downloads folder that already exists. So we have to provide the full path. So it's going to be /home/sanjeev/downloads, and we'll call this my new folder. And you can see here on the right, it got created inside the downloads directory. And we can go ahead and just move there just to make sure. And you can see here the new folder that we just created. All right. So up to this point, we've learned how to, find out where we are in the Linux file system. We've learned how to move around in the file system using the change directory command. And we've learned how to create and create a file as well as folders. So the two last things I wanted to cover, well, actually I've got a few more outside of that, but the next two things I want to cover are how do we delete a file or folder? And the command to delete a file is rm, and then the name of the file, or once again, instead of just providing the name, you can provide a full path to any file within the entire file system, right? So here inside the downloads folder, we have file 1. If we want to remove file 1, we just type in rm file 1, And after you do that, we can see here it just got deleted. And if we do ls, it's gone. Now let's say we want to delete the file that we created in the root folder. We can once again change directories to the root folder, cd/, and we can type in rm another underscore file, or we can always, stay where we were, and we can just do rm and then provide the full path to this file, which is just going to be /another underscore file. And because we're changing a file that's in the root directory, we have to do sudo. And so now if we change directories back to the root directory, we can see here that file is gone. Now, the next thing I want to do is show you how to delete a folder. And you're probably thinking, well, can we just type in the rm command and then just point it to a directory? And you'll see you can and you can't, sort of. So let's go back to my home directory, and let's go back to the downloads folder again. Just print out the contents. We have two folders within the downloads folder. We have my new folder and recently downloaded. So let's delete my new folder. So let's try rm and then my new folder. And by the way, guys, if you've never worked on Linux command line, one thing you should get used to is using the tab command. So if I type in the letter capital M, I can press the tab key and it's going to auto-complete the rest of that word or that file or folder so that I don't have to type it out. And it's just a quick, shorthand trick. Linux will automatically auto-complete whatever you're typing so that you don't have to type out a really long name. So we want to delete my new folder. If I hit enter, it says cannot remove my new folder, which is a directory. So this is saying that it looks like the rm command can't actually remove directories. And that's not exactly true. It can, but I have to introduce a new concept, which is command options and arguments. So in Linux, most commands, they allow you to add extra options and arguments to the command to tweak the behavior. And to better explain that concept, I'm going to focus on using the ls command. So ls by default just prints out the contents of a directory. But with specific arguments and options, we can change that behavior. So the first one that people always learn for ls is you do ls. And when you want to add an extra option, you just do space. Then you type in dash. And then you type in the option or argument that you want. So the first option I want to show you is L. So when you do ls space dash L, lowercase l, it's going to print out the contents of the folder you're in a listed format, and it also provides a lot of extra information like what is my new folder. So this first letter right here tells you what type of file or folder it is. So when it says D, that implies it's a directory. And then, the rest of these values is related to permissions. I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. We've got another video for that. This is the owner of the directory or file. This is the group of the owner, the group of the directory as well. This is the size of the directory, and this is the date and time the file or folder was last modified. So you can see here, just adding the -L completely changes the behavior of the command. And I want to move up a level back to my home directory. So we're in /home/Sanjeev. And if we do ls again, these are the files and folders that it shows us. But there are other options and arguments we can add to see a few other things. So if we do ls-a, what this is going to do is it's going to show us hidden folders, right? And any folder that starts with a dot is a hidden folder. So you can see here the .cache folder, we couldn't see that when we just ran ls. But if you do ls-a, it's going to show us the hidden folders as well. And the great part about options in in any Linux command is you can string multiple options and arguments together. So I showed you two different options. I showed you the -l, which lists it vertically and provides you, some extra information. And then the -a, which shows you hidden files. So what happens if we do ls-la? You can see here now it lists it vertically due to the -l, but it also shows us the hidden files due to the -a. So you can string as many options and arguments as you want to any Linux command to tweak the behavior of that command. Now you may be wondering, well, how do I know, what options I have and, what arguments I can use on any command? I mean, you can obviously Google it, but when you're on the command line, there's a couple of different ways to get that information. So there's the two quick ways is you type in the command that you want. So if you type in ls-help, it's going to provide you information on how to use the different options and arguments for a command. Let me make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. And you can see it's got an exhaustive amount of documentation, but you can see here the -a, it's telling us to not ignore entries starting with the dot. So it's basically saying, show me the hidden files. And we've got other options, let's say -h, which stands for human readable. So as an example, let's go to the root folder. Ugh, all right. Actually, I just need to go to root. What is happening? All right. And now let's do ls-l. What is this value right here, right? I think this is in bytes, but like who talks about numbers? Who talks about file sizes in bytes? That's not an easy method for me. I'd rather tell me in megabytes or gigabytes. So if I do ls-l and then h, which stands for human readable, it now tells me it's 1.9 gigabytes. So you can see that's just another example of another option or argument for the ls command. But I just wanted to show you that if you want to figure out, what options are at your disposal for a specific command, just type in that command and just do --help. The other option is to type in the word man and then the name of the command you want help with. So we do man ls. What this is it's pulling up the manual. So man is short for manual, and it's pulling up the manual for that specific command, and it provides a complete in-depth explanation on the different options and arguments at your disposal. You can use your up and down arrow key to move around. The one thing you do have to make sure you understand is if you look at the bottom, you can see here to exit out of the manual page, it's not, you don't hit escape, you don't hit, anything else, you hit the letter Q to quit. So keep that in mind. I remember when I was first learning Linux, I always struggled to remember that Q is to quit from the manual page. So if I just type in Q, I've now exited the manual page. All right, so now we've discussed how to create and delete files. How do we rename and move files, right? So to move a file, we have a command called mv. So let's go to my home directory again. And I'm going to just quickly create a file. All right, so now we have the new file that I just created. Let's say I want to take this file and move it inside my music directory. To do that, we type in mv. And the way that the mv command works is you provide the file that you want, and how you get to that file, you can provide a relative path or an absolute path, and then you provide the destination of where you want that file to be. And that destination can once again be a relative or an absolute path. So if we do mv, we want this new file, so we do the path to this new file, and we can just do the relative path because it's in the same directory, and we want to move it to the music folder, then we can just once again also provide the relative path to the music directory. All right, So if we do that, if we print ls, you can see the new file is gone, and that's because it's in the music directory. And if we move in there and check that, you can see that's where the new file is. So let me go back up a directory again, and remember to move up a directory, you always do cd ... And we're once again in /home/Sanjeev. I want to just do a few more examples of the mv command. Not so much to reinforce the idea of how to use the command, because the command itself is pretty simple, but I want to reinforce the idea of, using relative versus absolute paths. So let me create a new file. We'll call this image1. So we have image1, and I'm going to move to the root. Let's go to, let's say we want to take this image and we want to move it to /var. What we can do is I can do mv. Now I provide the path to the file that I want to move. So how do I get to that? I can either provide the relative path, which is just typing image1 because it's in this folder, or I can obviously do /home/Sanjeev/image1. Either one works. Then I have to provide the full absolute or relative path to the destination. So if I want to move it to /var, I just type that. And once again, if you want to move a file into, a specific folder like /var, you need root permissions. So just type in sudo before that. And you can see here, image1 is gone. If we go to /var, we can see image1 is here. You see? So, the mv command is pretty straightforward. Just make sure you understand that the first argument to the command is the path to the file you want to move, and the second argument is the destination you want to move it to. Now, you may be wondering, well, how do I rename files? And the easiest way to explain how to do that is we don't even need to use a new command. We can actually use the mv command. So as an example, we have image1. Let's say we want to name it to image30. All right, so you type in mv, and we provide the path to where this file is. And since we're already in the /var folder, it's directly in that directory. So we can just type in the relative path, which is just image1. And then if we want to rename it, you just provide the destination to be the same exact folder it's already in, and just provide a different name. So we can just type in image30. So what this is actually saying is take the file in this /var folder called image1 and move it to the /var folder with the name of image30. So if we do that, and once again, because we're moving files around in the /var directory, we have to put in sudo to get root privilege. And you can see here it's changed to image30. And we can also move and rename files at the same exact time as well. So if I did mv image30 and I want to move it to /home/Sanjeev/documents, and I want to, when I move it, I also want to rename it as document 10, we can do that. And we got to obviously get root access. And if we go to, if we check here, you can see the file is gone. And then we can go to /home/Sanjeev/ and then cd documents. And you can see here it renamed it to document 10 as well as moved it to the documents directory. And I realized when I was explaining the command line options and arguments, I was doing that because I also wanted to circle back around to how do we delete directories, right? If you remember when we were trying to delete the folder within the downloads, hold on, I gotta go up a folder and then go to downloads. we were trying to do the rm command on my new folder, and it's telling us we couldn't do that. Well, now that we know about Linux options, let's go ahead and do rm -- help. And let's see if there's anything that can point us to how to delete a directory. So we have -f, never prompt, so that's just forcing it. That's not going to help us. Prompt before every removal, that's not going to help us. That's not going to help us. Oh, but if you look at the -r, look at what that does. That removes directories and their contents recursively. So what that means is it'll delete the folder as well as whatever's inside the folder, which is usually what you want, right? If you delete a folder, you don't want to just keep the files that are within that folder. You want everything within that folder to get deleted. So let's try that. So it's rm -r, and we type in the name of the directory that we want to delete. And look, it seems to have worked if we check. And you can see now the my new folder has been deleted. All right, guys, so the next thing I want to discuss is how to read the contents of a file. And to do that, we have a command called cat. So let's go to /var/log. And within there, there's the syslog file. And what we're going to do is just type in cat and then the name of the file. And you're going to see what it does is it's going to spit out the contents of that file, all of it. And you can see here, you know, as I scroll up, you know, this is a fairly large file with a lot of log messages, and it just dumps it all out to the terminal. It's a little messy to look at when you're doing like this. So when you have large files like this, sometimes cat isn't the best option. We have a few other tools that allow us to easily navigate through larger files, and those are more and less. If I type in more and the name of the file, you can see here what it did is instead of spitting out the whole content of the file, you can see here it only spit out a certain amount of lines. And what it does is it fills your entire terminal. So it spits out enough lines to fill your terminal window. And then if you want to see more lines, you can either hit enter to go down one line. So I can just keep hitting enter just to step through it line by line. Or I can press space, and this is going to fill up my terminal window with a whole new set of lines. So it kind of goes through a larger jump of lines. And you can just keep spacing through or entering through line by line until you get to the line that you want. So it's a little easier to navigate larger files with the more command versus just the cat. I like to use cat if I just want to quickly see like a smaller sized file and I need to just check something quickly. But if there's a large file, you want to use a command like more so that you can, you know, easily just kind of find where you want to get to in the file and then stop there instead of just dumping it all out to the terminal window. And then the next command I want to show you is, it's called less. So you just type in less and then the name of the file. And less does pretty much exactly the same thing as more. It's just a newer, think of it as a newer or enhanced version of the command. I think it's supposed to be a little better or a little faster when it runs. So I guess moving forward, stick to using less instead of using more, but realistically, you'll be happy with either one. And you can see here, less has the same exact behavior. I can enter through line by line. I can also space to jump through all of them. And I guess I forgot to show you how to do this with the more command, but it's the same thing with less. To exit out of this, of the, I guess the more application, if you want to call it that, or just to exit out to back to the command line, you just type in the letter Q, and then it takes you back to the command line. So that was the last command I wanted to show you for this video. We're going to have many more videos coming up. I'm going to explain everything that is to know about Linux. Well, that's an exaggeration, but I'm going to teach you all the fundamentals of how to use the Linux command line, how to set up different services, how to work with permissions. I'll do a full tutorial on explaining what sudo is and root access. So we've got a lot. We've got many more videos coming up, but hopefully this will get you started on the right track, and hopefully you guys will, set up either, like an Ubuntu VM or something, so you guys can play around and get more comfortable with this, because you want to reinforce everything that I just taught you guys.